Hello everybody, great to see so many people here in the middle of 2 long weekends. So thank you very much for your dedication for coming along today. Really looking forward to this hour that we've got together talking about the future of work, as you can see here. And we're going to cover a lot of different aspects around the future of work. So let me start with my regular rules of engagement for all my sessions. Some people who've been here before will know what they are, but let me quickly go through them. So the first one is I want to give you some things to think about today, and I encourage you, as I always do in these sessions, to think big in this session. So even think about things that might not be practical or realistic for you in your everyday work, because it's easier to think that way and then step it back when life gets in the way afterwards than the other way around. And the second thing is be playful. So if you're here live, then make the most of it. So there'll be time for you to ask me questions, and also I'll ask you questions as you go. And the more that you engage in this session, the more value you'll get, and the more value the rest of the room will get as well. We are recording this, so if you're just watching the recording, hello to you. So you won't get the benefit of the live engagement, but I'm sure you'll still get value from this as well. My biggest goal for you is to give you some things that you can take away and put into action immediately, not in 10 weeks or 10 years, but things that you can take and ideally in 10 minutes after we finish, you can do something with the value that you get from this session. And of course, because we're recording it, you can always go back and watch it later as well. Okay, so let's talk about disruption here, because the future of work has changed, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, but especially in the last 5. So I'm going to start with a story that happened in my life must be about 10 years ago now, probably 11 years ago now. There's a local park near where I live. So people are from Perth. I live in Leederville, and there's a park, a large park, which is a multi-use park, about 200 meters from where I live. And I remember about 10 years ago, we used to take our Cocker Spaniel, Jessie, for a run in the park. And now that was a long time ago, so Jessie's no longer with us, but we have 2 other Cocker Spaniels, Harley and Jasper, who are part of our family now. But I remember taking Jessie for a run in the park. And at the time, my local council, the city of Vincent, had zoned the park into 2 areas. So they kind of look like this. So these were signs all around the park showing that there was a blue area, which is at the south part of that park, where you could let your dog off the leash and she could run around everywhere. And then there was a red area further north, where you had to have your dog on the leash. Now, there were these signs all around the park, but the problem was between the blue area and the red area, there was no gate, there was no fence, and Jessie can't read. So, of course, we let her loose in the blue area and she'd run everywhere around the park. And I remember thinking, even at that time, isn't this what disruption's like? This is exactly what's happened. Now, in our world, the dogs are off their leash and there's no way that we could bring them back or hope that they'd come back or wish that it wasn't like that. We are in a world that is being constantly changed and disrupted. So yesterday it might have been COVID, today it might be AI, tomorrow what's it going to be? Global trade wars? Who knows? Okay, so we have to manage our work and our workplaces through this constant change. Of course, we have to manage ourselves as well, but today, because we're talking about the future of work, let's focus on what's happening in our work and our workplaces. So today is very much about people. So it's empowering your people to embrace the future. And maybe it's a little bit about yourself as well. So the key words here is, one is empowering. So for us as leaders, because this session is very much for leaders, what are we doing to empower our people, to facilitate and support them? And also it's about embracing the future, not just accepting it or tolerating it, but embracing it and ideally even leading it. And we'll talk about this as we go. So just to get started, I'd like to know how you feel about the future of work. So I'm going to ask you to interact and engage in various ways during this session. Just to get started, if you're not familiar with Zoom and the Zoom emojis, if you haven't used them, just go to the React button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and using an emoji there, give me an idea of how you feel about the future of work. So I've kind of kept this broad, so you can define future of work any way that you want. It could be about your work, it could be about your organization, your industry, what's happening in the future, what the future of work means for your kids. I'm just like to get some idea of your sentiment. Like, how are people feeling? Okay, so I'm seeing a few thumbs up. That's good. There's a okay. I think generally it's positive. Okay, good. So also, can I invite you throughout this whole session, please feel free to use those reaction emojis, because it's really useful for us in the room to know how people are feeling about anything that comes up in the session. So also, feel free to use the chat as well. So I'll ask you when we get to questions to type in the chat, and I'll answer as many as possible. Feel free to use the chat, type in your questions even while I'm speaking. I won't get distracted by that, but I will stop for questions as we go. Another thing I'd like to know, because we've got quite a few people in the room today, where are you? So let me just bring up a little map here. I know most people here are in Australia or New Zealand, but if you can just type in the chat, where are you? So where are you living at the moment? Where are you from? Okay, I'm sure there'll be quite a few people from the east and west coast of Australia, so mostly from Australia. And there might be some people from elsewhere as well. Okay, so mostly from, throughout Australia. Great. Okay, now, most of what we're talking about today is going to be relevant regardless of where you are, but there's some differences. In other parts of the world, the future of work might be quite different, but for most of us here, I think we're facing similar sort of issues when it comes to the future of work. And when we talk about the future of work, it's a very, very broad topic. So what do I mean by that? Well, it could mean a number of different things. It could mean where work gets done, which is a big topic at the moment. It could mean like what direction your work's going and what you're focusing on. It could be about how you collaborate and innovate together with your team, how you make sure that you're solving customer and client problems, what are the skills that we need and the mindset we need to be able to adapt to the future. Of course, money. At the moment, with high costs of living and rising inflation and housing affordability being a problem, well, inflation maybe not so much, maybe we get that under control, but there are other things that go along with that, that balance it out, and maybe not in a positive way. Then looking into the future and knowing what work's coming up in the future. And of course, AI is a big topic for us as well. How do humans and machines work together in the future? So we're not going to cover all of this, but I'm going to tell you the 4 key elements of the future of work, and we'll look at each one of them briefly. And in each of these 4 areas, I want to give you something really practical that you can do and you can take away from this session. So these 4 things are broadly what I talk about, and I often do keynote presentations on maybe one of them, or run full-day workshops on maybe one of them. So we won't go into each of them, I won't tell you everything about each of them, but I'll give you enough to get some real practical take-home value from this session. So here are the 4, and they're all A's. So the first one is to assess what work's required in the future. So for all of us as leaders, looking ahead and understanding what's over the horizon and around the corner. And the more senior you are as a leader, the more of your salary is being paid for you to have this skill of foresight, being able to understand what's coming up in the future. It's not always easy, because it's very easy to get caught up in the everyday operational work and forget about assessing the work that's coming up in the future. But that's really important for us. And the second one is about how you as an organization attract the best people. So people looking from outside, are you the sort of place where they want to work? Are you the sort of leader they want to follow? Now, the leader bit, they may not know until they start working with you, but certainly, are you the sort of organization that will attract the best people? And the third one is about humans and machines working together. So if it's physical work, it might be humans and robots. If it's knowledge work, it's humans and AI. So we'll look at that as well. I do a lot of work in this area, so we could spend a whole session on that, but we won't. But I'll refer you to some other resources as well in that area. And the last one is internally, have you got a culture that's open to change, that's accepting of change, and as I said before, embracing change and perhaps even leading change? So those are our four. These are signposts. These are the four things that we're going to cover together in the time that we've got here. So we'll do them in that order so you can keep track of where we are. Before we get into those four, there's another concept that I love. It's a concept that was developed during COVID. People hate talking about COVID now, but we can learn some lessons from it. And one of them came from Macquarie University. Early in the pandemic, they surveyed Australian leaders from different sectors, different industries, to see what the best leaders were doing to lead their people through this time of great uncertainty and crisis even. And they came up with this concept, the avocado leader. I wish I thought of it myself. So they said the best leaders are like avocados. So they've got this hard inner core that's looking after the organization's goals and meeting your objectives, meeting KPIs, making sure you can still serve your customers and other stakeholders. But they've also got this soft outer layer, which is looking after their people. Because of course, it's the people who are driving those organizational goals and objectives and the work. Now, the best leaders have always been avocado leaders. And maybe you've been lucky to have an avocado leader in your life. And maybe your team is lucky for you to be an avocado leader in their life. And now we're all being called to step up and be avocado leaders, because we've got, maybe not a pandemic, but we've got a lot of other change and disruption coming up in our life. So as we go through these four things, think to yourself about how much of an avocado leader am I in each of these four areas. And I'm going to give you some practical things to help you with that. All right, so let's look at this first area here. So this first area is understanding what's coming up in the future. So a large part of my work as a futurist, when I'm not doing keynote presentations, is to help leadership teams with this. So they might be doing some sort of strategic planning, and they might have some offsite, some retreat, where the senior leaders get together and they're going to create their strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. But leading into that planning, they want to do a scan of what's happening in the world, because there's no point making a plan based on what you know right now if that plan becomes irrelevant or obsolete or disrupted by things changing in the world around us. So quite often they get me to come in and run my future scenarios program to help them understand what sort of things are happening in the world and which of them might have an impact on us, so we can then feed into our strategic plan. So that future scenario is very, very broadly and has these 3 stages to it. So the first part is the scan. So look at what's happening outside in the world, maybe even outside our industry, because there are things outside the industry that might affect us. Then choose the ones that are going to be the most important for us to include in our strategic plan, so we can then act on them. So let's do a little mini version of that. We're not going to do it in a lot of detail, but I think just doing this and do it to whatever level you're interested. But I think you'll find it useful just to go through. In fact, we're going to go through the first 2 stages, and in particular, that choose stage, which is, I think, the really important one. So let's start with the scan stage. So scanning is looking at things that are outside your business, your organization, your industry, external things that might affect you in the future. So what are the sort of things? There might be things like tariffs and global trade wars. It might be an election coming up in a few weeks' time. It could be changes that the EU are making around sustainability of imported goods. It could be the growing role of China as an economic power. It could be the growing role of India's population, which is now the biggest country in the world, and their impact. Okay, so what are those sort of things? I'm going to give you a minute here and invite you to just write down for yourself what you think some of those things might be for you, and also feel free to share them in the chat as well. ESG is one, so environmental, social governance, cost of living, its impact on budgets, AI, of course, less reliance on the human workforce, government changes, banking changes, cost of living, data security, remote and in-person work and teams and culture. Again, around sustainability with renewable energy, the aging population. Good, thank you for that. Now, I've only given you a minute to do that, and normally we might spend half a day doing this sort of analysis. And by the way, if you're doing this sort of analysis, and the best thing you can do, well, the second best thing you can do, the best thing you can do is get me to come and help you with that. The second best thing you can do is use AI to help you with that as well. And if you're using AI tools, just a little bit of a hint, use the Deep Research Facility, and it can do a lot of the research for you. So we won't go into more details, but if you want to know more, then experiment with your AI tools or engage me to come and run the Future Scenarios program for you. But that's actually not what I want to focus on today. So it's great that we've got those ideas. I'm really more interested in this second stage, which is you make a big list of ideas, and often when we do this, that the leadership team comes up with 50 or more ideas or trends or possible changes that could happen externally. Then how do you narrow them down to find the ones that are the most valuable and the most important? So how do you choose? And I reckon this one is the crucial step, because you've got to make the right choices. In fact, let me ask you, how do you choose, or how would you choose which are the ones that are going to be the most important for you to feed into your strategic plan? Can I ask, just type in the chat, how would you choose? And there's obviously more than one answer. So you could choose the ones that are the closest in time. You could choose the ones that are going to have the biggest impact. You could choose the ones that are the most likely. So those are 3 criteria. What else? How would you choose? Yep, ease and impact. Biggest impact, in other words, short term. Yep. Yep, so something that meets or affects community needs, because we're looking at the external pressures. Values and needs from Jackie. Yep, risk and reward. Good, okay. So let me suggest one other thing which didn't quite come up exactly, but I reckon one of the most important criteria you apply when you're choosing the things that you're then going to feed into your strategic plan is that is it going to ignite your team? Are they going to be excited by it? It doesn't mean your whole team. It may be there's one person who's going to love this idea of ESG, and so she's going to really run with this idea. So this is one that a lot of leaders don't think about, or that they don't use as a criterion when they're trying to evaluate and prioritize those trends that come out in the scan. But the point is that if you could choose some trend that you think is really important, but if you don't have your people on board, it's very difficult for you to then execute that as part of your plan. You're always trying to force them to come on board with that idea. And I reckon one of the most important criteria you should use is, does it matter to my team? Okay, now, that's kind of heresy to some people, because you're talking about strategic planning. It should all be about what's actually going to happen to the organization, what's actually going to be the most important thing, what's going to move the dial, as people say. But the part of that is going to be about your people. If you're starting from scratch and you're a startup company and you're going to build a business, then you can start the other way. You can say, this is going to be really important. Let's make sure that we employ people who are excited by that. But if you don't have that already, if you've already got a team, then you want to bring your team along on the journey. I remember many, many years ago, we've got a friend of ours who's a family friend of my mum's. Her son, so my mum's family friend, was into multi-level marketing, and so was her son. And her son was visiting Perth one year from Brisbane, and my mum said, "I'll come over for dinner." And he said, "Oh, look, I'd love to come. Thank you so much for having me. Is it okay if I do a little presentation about this multi-level marketing program after dinner?" And my mum, because she's a nice person, she said, "Yes, absolutely." And so her friend's son came along. We had a nice dinner, and afterwards he pulled up his laptop and he said, I've got this presentation. And it wasn't a surprise because he'd let us know in advance. And he opened it up, and his first slide, he said, Auntie Fleur, I want you to, at the end of this session, give me an A, B, or C answer. And he said, I'll explain what that means. So A is, this is awesome, I love it, sign me up for it straight away. You've sold me on it. B is, I'm kind of interested, but. So in other words, I've got some questions still, but I'm kind of interested. So I'm not ready to sign up yet, but please either answer the questions or keep me informed, and I'll get back to you later. And C is, see you later, I'm just not interested. And I thought there was a great way to frame up the presentation. So she gave permission, or he gave permission for my mum to say yes or no or maybe. And I reckon when you're looking at your trends that you've identified in the scan, I reckon this ABC is a pretty good way to categorize them. So absolutely you could classify them by impact, or what impact is going to have in the short term, or how likely they are, or even whether they're aligned with the values of the organization. But also think about, do I have somebody in my team who I could offer this to, and they'll go, awesome, this is an A project, I'd love to be involved in that. Even if you don't, are there some B people? Are there some B people in your team? And if you think, I don't have A's or B's, well, maybe this one's a non-starter. You have to do quite a bit of work to persuade them to come on the journey. And this is one of the best things that you can do to link your strategic planning with the actual execution. Because many leaders go away on a strategic planning retreat or an offsite, or they spend 2 days shut off from the rest of the world. They do their strategic plan, they bring it back, they announce it, they talk about it with their teams, and then nothing happens. If you don't have your champions who are going, this is awesome, or at the very least, you don't have your people who are going, but I'm kind of interested, but I just need you to talk me through it. If you don't have them and everyone's going, see you later, then there's no way you're going to get your plan implemented. Okay, and I reckon this is the biggest thing that you should do. Make sure that whatever trends you identify, you've got at least an A, at least a B, and ideally an A person that you can identify who's going to lead that project, because it's probably not going to be you. Because you as a leader have set the plan and you're doing the facilitation around, and you facilitate and support them, but somebody else is going to run the program. Another speaker I know, a friend of mine from South Africa, Steph du Plessis, who's a leadership expert, he talks about culture and employee engagement. He says this, your people are not there to execute your strategy. And you might go, well, Steph, that's not true. My people, that's exactly what they're there to do. I'm there to set the strategy. They're there to execute it. He goes, no, that's not what your people are there for. Your people are there, and the way he puts it, he puts it more elegantly than I would. He says your people are there to love and to be loved in their personal lives, and in their professional lives, they're there to do meaningful work. They want to feel happy at work and feel like they're making a difference. So if you don't give them work that allows them to feel that way, then don't be surprised if they push back or quietly quit, or however else you want to describe it. Okay, so that's, I think that when you're looking at assessing the work to be done, that's one of the most important things you should do. In fact, I asked people beforehand, people who are attending, I said, tell me your biggest challenges. And this is one of them, I'm keeping them anonymous, she said, my biggest challenge is creating a vision that resonates. And I think the person is here in this session today. I think your solution, part of that solution, is make sure that whatever vision you're creating, you know that you've got people who are excited by it. The second part of that is resistance to change, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But obviously, I hope it's obvious, there'll be less resistance to change if it's something that people are excited about doing. Okay, so that's the first section. The first section is about assessing what works to be done. Before we get on to the second one, I just want to quickly stop and check if there's any questions about that. I can see some thumbs up here, so thank you for that. That whole future scenarios area is a really big area, and Yeah, like I said, I quite often run 1 or 2 day workshops on that whole process. So I'm trying to give you one practical thing today that you can take away and use. And that is like, if you're looking for something really practical, look at your strategic plan now and look at the things that you've set out to achieve as a team or as an organization. And next to each of them, rank them with an A, B, or C. And with the A's, it may not be the whole team, but put the name of a person who's going to be the person who's running that project if they're not already doing it. Okay, so we spent quite a bit of time on that one, and partly because I think that's the one that is possibly the most controversial. So as a futurist, I'm supposed to say, look at the future, know what's coming up in the future, and make sure you orient your team and your organization to completely make sure that you're future focused. And I think that's true, and I should be doing that, and I do that. But also, I want to be a practical futurist and say, make sure you're working on things that people are interested in. So let's look at this second one here. So this is the external way that people look at your organization, to look at what are you doing to attract the best people to your organization. And there's a thing that was developed, there's this phrase called the employee value proposition. It's not a new phrase, so you might have come across it before, but it came out of the idea that from a marketing viewpoint, your organization should have a customer value proposition. This is why people should buy from you, should engage with you. The employee value proposition is this is why people should work for you or be part of your team or engage with you as an employee. So what are you doing for your employee value proposition? So I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to rate yourself from 1 to 10 and how strong is your EVP. So it's going to be a bit subjective, but I'm going to make it as objective as I can by giving you some things to help you with your rating. Okay, so I'm going to give you 10 things now in the next minute, and I'll ask you to count how many of them you would tick a yes to. And you would say yes to it if somebody who's not working from you, so somebody external, looking at your organization from the outside, would say, oh yes, this organization values this. If that's the case, tick here at count 1. Okay, so it's going to be 10 of them. So it's before they come to a job interview, not anything to do with even before they apply for a job. It's when they look at your organization, how many of these 10 things does it tick? Okay, so the first one is, these are things, by the way, this is based on research on what employees are looking for now in an organization, the best employees. Okay, so it's an organization that is actually AI positive, allows people to work with AI and encourages it. So tick. Is it a learning organization? Is it going to help me learn new skills? More broadly, is it going to help me with my career growth? Okay, tick. And does it provide hybrid or flexible work? So I'm okay with going, okay, it doesn't have to be hybrid, but it could also be flexible, like a 4-day work week. Does it have a high-performing culture? Tick. Does it encourage and embrace diversity, inclusion, and equity? Is it aligned with my personal values? Is it really clear whether or not it's aligned with my personal values? Tick. Does it support mental health and well-being? Tick. ESG, this came up earlier as well. Is there a focus on environmental, social, and governance issues and initiatives? And is there a strong sign that senior managers are supportive of that? And the last one, is it an organization where I feel I'll be making a difference? I can make a difference. Okay, so those are the 10 items. I hope you've got a score out of 10. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, can you please type in the chat the number that you got for your organization on a scale of 1 to 10? So just put in the number so it counts. Okay, good. I see there's an 8 in there as well. Excellent. Okay, it's even a 9 there. Fantastic. Okay, great. So most people are hovering around the 6 to 7 mark, which is really good. So what you're saying is that somebody who's looking to work at your organization can look at it from the outside and see very clearly that it covers 6, 7, or 8 or 9 of those things, which is fantastic. It's really good that that's the case, because more and more people who are looking to work somewhere, especially the best people, are not necessarily going to wait for a job ad or looking up Seek to find a job. They'll be looking for you in other ways. And one of those ways, in fact, might even be places like LinkedIn. Okay, and I want to talk about LinkedIn in a slightly different context here. LinkedIn was looking at workplace learning, and one of the things they were looking at is like what organizations doing with skills and learning and careers and so on, and how much of that is part of the employee value proposition. In fact, I'm going to do this as a poll here. Let me ask you, according to LinkedIn Learning's workplace report, what percentage of Australian organizations are providing online, I've just highlighted online learning and development, because I assume 100% are offering some sort of learning and development, or percent are offering online learning and development. So there's 4 options, A, B, C, and D. So please type in the chat, don't put in the number, type in the letter A, B, C, or D. So if you think it's 20%, it's A, 40% B, 60% C, and 80% D. This was last year's LinkedIn Learning report. Okay, so C seems to be by far the most popular answer. But the answer was D. So 80% of Australian organisations in last year's report, so this is for the year before, in 2023, were offering online learning and development. So 80%. Okay, obviously some online learning. It doesn't mean it's all online, but many of them do. And it's one of the things that especially the younger employees, like the Gen Zs, they value that. They want online L&D, as well as they want in-person L&D as well. So the first person to get that answer right was Diane. Congratulations, Diane. So isn't it interesting that we've got 80% of organisations in Australia who are providing online learning for their employees? This, excuse me, I know this personally. So I did this recently as, it's exactly like, strictly speaking, 78% rather than 80. I did this recently with the company GHD, so they've allowed me to share this publicly, and they run a careers week, and that was recently. They did it online. They invited me to do the opening keynote for their careers week, and at the end of it, I was so pleased that the clients who booked me, they said that the people who attended, they feel much more confident now about taking action with their career, independently and proactively looking after their career, as well as all the help that they get from GHD in this area. So this is what you want. So you want an organization that's not only looking at what's our profit going to be, what's our bottom line going to be, but also looking at what they're doing for their employees. Okay, another question for you, and this one I will ask you. Well, let me show you the examples first. So these are some organizations. I'll tell you what they are. So there's Google, there's Tesla, Meta. I'm going to ask you what these organizations have in common. Okay, so Google, Tesla, and Meta across the top. OpenAI, which is the company behind ChatGPT. Target. We'll look at Target in the US because it's a different company than Target here. Walmart, again, another big retailer. Uber, and NASA. So what do you think all of those organizations have in common? Can you just type in the chat? It's something to do with their employee value proposition, as a hint. Any guesses? Okay, so a couple of things coming in, looking at future needs. Hybrid work. Some sort of product in common. Fun. Training. Flexible work. Look, I'd love to say that it was one of those answers. In fact, it's not. All of these companies in the last couple of months have rolled back or completely deleted their diversity, equity, and inclusion policies to bring them in line with the US government. They weren't required to do it by law, but they felt that they had more chance of getting government favors by removing or rolling back their DEI initiatives. Now, NASA is a government organization, so they had to follow government rules, but the others just decided to do it because they felt they've been in a stronger position with the government. Now, civilized countries like Australia haven't, so we have got like more than 80% of our leaders, CEOs, say that we're strongly in favor of diversity and inclusion, and that's really important. It's really important for the workforce of the future, and the American government is doing it for ideological reasons, but for really practical reasons, we want to have a diverse workforce and an inclusive one. So diversity is like having a whole bunch of colored textures. Inclusion is about using them. So we've got complex problems in our world, complex interconnected problems, and we need diverse perspectives to address and solve them. And I hope that you, as a leader in your team or organization, are embracing the diversity. It's not always easy. I love this quotation from Michael Houston, who says that when you've got diversity in your team, sometimes you're going to have arguments and heated discussions and failures, right? And if you don't like that, then maybe innovation's not for you. Okay, so really highlighting the value that you get from having a diverse team that you include and bring in their different perspectives. Again, a comment that came in from one of the people who I asked, who I'm not sure if she's here now on the session today, but she said one of the leadership challenges that she's seeing is the misalignment across different generations, because that's part of diversity as well. We've now got 5 generations in the workforce. Possibly in your workforce you've got 5, and some if you've got young trainees, you might even have 6 generations kind of working together and collaborating. Okay, Sarah, you've said it in the chat, so I'll say I won't keep it anonymous because you've shared it in the chat. So yes, so this is a really important challenge. It's a challenge that many organizations are facing. So how do you address that? So again, I've got a little bit of a counterintuitive approach to this. And I think that a lot of people who are looking at managing different generations are looking at how do we get everyone to work together. In other words, look for what's common and how do we embrace that commonality. That's good, and I think that is really important if you're especially trying to avoid conflicts, but also look at the other side of that, which is what are the unique aspects that different generations are bringing into the workplace. So for example, there's this concept here called the workfluencer. Does anyone want to guess what a workfluencer is? Let me ask the question, like, are any of your employees workfluencers? So a workfluencer is a person, and it's typically a young person, who's kind of like an influencer, like an online influencer, but instead of running their own business and trying to make money by getting sponsored products because they've got lots of followers, they're talking about their work online. Okay, so the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you hope that it's mostly good, but you're okay with them, maybe talking about some of the things that are not so good as well, as long as predominantly they're talking about the good stuff. So do you have workfluencers in your team? And if you don't, I guess the other question to ask is, would you be willing to allow a workfluencer on your team to share about what they're doing? Now, you might want to put some guardrails in place and some guidelines so that they're not doing things that are inappropriate or breaching privacy, confidentiality, security. But leaving that aside, are you willing to let them loose and talk about what's happening? It's exactly what we do when we catch up at Barbie's over the weekend and talk about work, right? But this is online, public, recorded for posterity sometime. Okay, so again, how good is your culture that you'd be willing for workfluencers to talk about it online? Because again, coming back to your employee value proposition and your brand, the way that people are finding you, the best people are finding you, is not only by looking on Seek, not only looking at your website, not only reading job ads, but is talking to each other. Now, we oldies, we do that on LinkedIn, but there may be younger generations who are doing it on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. And are you willing to let that happen? Or do you have strict policies in place that say it's against your rules of employment? Okay, I just leave that one with you, but because of the main idea here is to look at your employee value proposition. And my suggestion for you, if you look at those 10 things, is to, if you didn't get 10 out of 10, look at the other things that you might be able to add to your employee value proposition to attract more people and the best people into your work. Okay, I'm going to again there's a question here. Are you saying LinkedIn is old school? Not necessarily old school, Alison. So Facebook, yes. I think Facebook is possibly the thing that young people look down on. LinkedIn, not necessarily. So LinkedIn is still a professional network, but I was thinking more in the way that people are, you can do LinkedIn Reels, but they tend to be more professionally oriented. Whereas like if you think about social media influencers on TikTok or Instagram, they will do things in a much less formal way. They'll do things in a jokey way. They'll have emojis and hashtags, and the sort of followers they get are different from the sort of followers that you get on LinkedIn. So absolutely, no, LinkedIn's not old school at all. It's really good as a professional network, but also some of the Gen Zs are going to be influencers in a different way. And also, if you kind of believe that like birds of a feather flock together, if you've got some great Gen Z employees in your team, well, why don't you get more of them? And if they're going to be able to attract people like them, that's good for you and good for your organization. Okay, let's look at this third area. So this one we're not going to spend a lot of time on because I speak about AI a lot, as people know if you've followed me for a while. So this third one here is humans and machines working together. So again, it's about humans and robots if it's physical work, or humans and AI if it's knowledge work. So the biggest thing around this is this idea that I say over and over and over again. I feel like I'm saying, and people are sick of me saying it, but anytime you're thinking about augmenting humans and machines, it's got to be about people first, technology second. So you see stories about like AI nurses. This is a story that NVIDIA is creating these AI nurses, and it's not physical robot nurses who are doing the job and replacing the job of human nurses. It's more like this, like an AI, like a tablet where you're speaking to an AI avatar that can do the routine non-clinical stuff that nurses can do. To give advice to patients, but the non-clinical stuff. So nurses have more time to spend looking at the more technical, more clinically oriented things. Okay, so it's AI helping humans do what they do best, helping the humans do what they do best. And lots of people are using AI at the moment. So Google did some research, global research, but they said in Australia, we've already got 3 out of 4 people who are using AI in their workplace. Okay, so 75%, which is really good. However, let me show you some other research that came out around the same time. This was done by the global workforce company Slack. And again, they surveyed the global survey, but they broke it down by country. They said that of the people who are using AI in their workplace, almost half of them, so just over 40% of them, said they don't want to tell their manager that they're using AI in their workplace. Okay, so why do you think that is? Let me ask you. So why do you think that people who are using AI don't want to tell their manager? Can you just type 1 or 2 words in the chat of why you think that these people who are using AI, using it effectively, don't want to tell their manager? And then I'll tell you the top 3 reasons that the people gave in the survey. Okay, cheating, job protection, not fully occupied, it's not their own work. Losing their job. Okay, good. I've put up a sample of them here. Yeah, okay, good. So the top 3 reasons, they did come up there. I didn't put up all the chat chats here, but the top 3 reasons. Number 3 was that they would be seen as cheating. Number 2 was that they'd be seen as incompetent. And number 1 was they thought they'd be seen as lazy. Okay, so even though it's a really powerful tool that they could be and should be using, they were worried that if they told their manager that they were using AI, they'd be seen as lazy, incompetent, or cheating. So whose fault is that? The managers, right? It's the managers who have created a culture, intentionally or not, that using AI is not the thing that you should be doing. You should not be using AI. So another thing that did come up, which a lot of people said here, was they're worried about their job. But that wasn't even one of the top 3 reasons. It was that they'd feel like we have to use this secretly, otherwise we get in trouble. Okay, so a big part of this is, as Sandra has just said here, it's a lack of understanding of AI, and not so much understanding from the employee's viewpoint, but it's understanding of the AI culture that you want to create from the manager's viewpoint as well. So whenever I do keynote presentations, I talk about this. I talk about it from 2 viewpoints. So one is, like I give people, everyone that can download a copy of my ebook with AI prompts that they can use for their professional role. So even the 25% of people who aren't using it can get some ideas on how to get started. And even the 75% who are using it can use it more effectively as well. But also, I want managers and leaders to build a culture of accepting, adopting, and embracing AI. And I often say this: who are your AI champions? So who have you got in your team who should be leading your AI initiatives? If you haven't already got somebody in your team who's doing that, and again, I generally think it should not be you. You've got other things to look at. If you can identify somebody else, if you haven't already got somebody else in your team to do that, can I suggest that one of the biggest takeaways you'll get from today's presentation is identifying an AI champion in your team. Okay, so think about that. And if you haven't got somebody, please identify an AI champion. And again, like when I work with leaders, we talk about how to support and nurture those champions, because they're not always the most popular person on the team. If they're the ones who are in charge of AI, they might annoy people. They might annoy your peers who are thinking, who are they? Who's this upstart who's telling me about AI, or telling Gihan's team about AI? Okay, so identify your AI champions. The other thing that I highly recommend that you do is run AI projects. I've told this story before about an organization that I was working with that they do a lot of community work, and one of the things they do is childcare. And so the organization got me in to run some, to help facilitate them running some AI projects. And the childcare team came up with a project that would allow them, every time a new child was enrolled, they have to create a development plan for that child. And it used to take them about 2 or 3 hours for one of those teachers to create the development plan. They went away and found an AI solution. They created an AI solution that would reduce that time to 15 minutes. And most of the time, a little bit was typing in the details of that child. The AI would take a couple of minutes to create the plan, and then most of the time was like about 10 minutes for some expert to review it and make sure it was right and accurate and appropriate. Okay, because you should always have human intelligence reviewing the AI work. So that was great. That was a really good thing that they did. And then we had a session where each of the teams, the childcare team, shared their idea. The other teams shared their ideas as well. So it's creating a culture where AI is okay. And in fact, we're embracing AI. And the other thing that they did, and I encourage you to do as well, is when you've got people running these projects, share those success stories. Get everyone to share, to show, first of all, that you're open to, you've got a culture that's AI positive and open to AI, but also it sometimes creates ideas for other groups. In fact, this team, and again, they've given me permission to share this, is the childcare team created this fantastic AI software or AI project to help with their development plans. The aged care team, who was also sitting in the room listening to the childcare team talking about it, they said, can we talk later? Because we can use exactly that same software, slightly modified, anytime we have a new resident coming into our retirement village. Then the HR team said, can we talk later as well? Because we can see if we can modify that slightly every time we have a new employee. We can use this to help them craft their career plan or their development plan. So share the ideas, not only because it's a good idea to share the ideas to show that you've got that culture, but also that cross-pollination of ideas can really accelerate your AI growth. Okay, so let me stop and ask for questions here. I'm a little bit nervous doing this because people always ask me lots of questions about AI. Can I invite you to focus on the idea of building that AI culture when you ask me questions now? There are a lot of other places that I've talked about AI, and if you go to my website, you'll find plenty of other resources, full sessions about AI. In fact, I did one last month about AI at work, and we go into that in more detail. But let me see if there's any questions before we get onto the last section. Okay, I'm going to continue because our timing is perfect. Okay, so this last one is building a culture that embraces change. So the employee value proposition is what you tell the outside world. This adapting is what happens internally. Do you have your culture that you can genuinely say it's embracing change? So I'm going to show you a picture here. I've shared this once before, so you might have seen this before. So if you have seen this before, just hold back on your answer, just to give other people a chance to guess. Okay, so here's a question. Here's a sign that I saw at a place I went to recently. Free earplugs. I've blanked out a couple of the things which will give it away, so I'm going to unblank them later. But I'd like you to, in the chat, type in where you think I might have seen this sign. So I'll give you an example of an answer that's not correct. Somebody said music festival. Okay, so if you think it was a music festival, type music festival in there. That's not the right answer. But where do you think I might have seen this sign? Library, childcare centre, see the one? Airport, motorsport, construction, shopping centre. Cafe, workplace, public transport. Wouldn't that be good if everyone else was using earplugs? Mine site. It actually was. A couple of people did say this and did come up as one of the top answers. It's my local library. So my local library is now a community hub. It's not the library that I grew up with. So my local library, I've lived in my area for more than 30 years now, and I was always somebody who'd use the library at school, at unis, and you know what libraries used to be like in the olden days. And there used to be places where you used to go, and you had to be silent because that's a place where you were getting information, and so you had to concentrate there. Now, of course, it's still a place where you can get information, and I can still borrow books from my library, but it's not the only place where you go for information. It's not even the main place for most people, because we all have access to a library and more in the palm of our hands or in our pockets and purses. So libraries, many of them have now had to transform to become community hubs. So they've changed because the world has changed. And I wonder whether that's true for you as well. There are a lot of organizations that are still operating the way they used to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, when in fact the world has moved on around them. And what you want is for your team and your culture to embrace that kind of change. And I reckon people are at different levels of being open to change. So it's unrealistic to expect everybody to say we love change, we embrace change, we want bring it on. Okay, but you might find people in your team who identify with one of these four levels, and you probably can identify it for them as well. I'm not asking you to name any names here, but you probably know some people who resist change, who push back against it. They want to go back to the way things were. There's some other people who will accept it. They go, oh, we know change is happening, bring us along, we're okay, we'll come along on the ride. They're still passive, as in they're not actively promoting change, but at least they're okay with it. The next level, and this is above the line, these are the people who embrace change, who look forward to it, and they see the opportunity in change, not only the disruption and the uncertainty and the chaos. And ideally, there's a fourth level as well. These are the people who are really saying, not just saying bring it on, but saying we're going to bring it on. We're the ones who are leading the change. We're the ones who are going to cause the disruption and really take advantage of the opportunity. So I just wonder for yourself, I'm not going to ask you to share in the chat or anything like that, and where are you if you think about your culture, your team culture, broadly speaking, which of those four levels are you at? Broadly speaking, given that there are going to be people at different levels. Are you a culture that embraces change or leads it above the line? Or are you a culture that's below the line, that's not yet being really embracing change? Because if change is going to be part of our future, wouldn't it be reasonable to say that a skill that we need for the future is adaptability, so we're ready for change? Okay, so that's really important. Again, I'm not going to ask you to share because I'm happy for you to keep that confidential. But again, a comment that came up was from somebody who I think is here. Again, I'm keeping it anonymous unless they want to identify themselves. So their biggest challenge from their team is getting them to do more than just collect data and create content, but have those critical thinking skills, have those analytic skills, and be able to do more than just be a gatherer of information. Okay, so this is it's a really important thing that many leaders are finding in their workplaces now. I've got one last little poll for you here, where we'll look at what Gallup, they do their annual employee engagement survey, and let me bring up the poll for you so we can do that. And they asked employees about their workplace and about employee engagement. They do it every year. You might know this. But one of the questions they asked, or one of the survey results, was what contributes to employee engagement, positively or negative. So of these four options, which of these four things accounted for the biggest, which had the biggest impact in employee engagement in the team? Is it job security, which is A? Is it the managers, which is B? Is it diversity and inclusion, which is C? Or is it flexible work, which is D? Okay, I think there's a clear horse that's running way ahead at the moment, and it is in fact managers. That's correct. So yeah, who's the first one to get that? Leanne. Congratulations, Leanne. So absolutely, it was the managers. So most people said our employee engagement is the biggest impact comes from our managers, positive and negative, 70%. 70% said this is due to our managers. So if you've got a culture where people are, say, below the line rather than above the line, can I say this? And I say this with great kindness. The person at fault for that is possibly you. Okay? Which means that it's your responsibility to change that, because you have a huge impact on your team, and it's not the team, it's about the culture of the team, and you have a huge impact on the team culture. If you want something specific that can help you in this area, I reckon it's this phrase here: I trust your judgment. Okay, tell you what I mean by that. Next time somebody comes to you and asks for help with something, imagine in your head whether you could say to them, actually, I'm going to pick Leanne, I think, because Leanne, you just responded to that question. Could I actually say, Leanne, I trust your judgment. Go away and do it. I trust your judgment. Now, you're only doing it in your head, right? So there's some people you can't say that to because they're not senior enough, or they don't understand the rules, or you know that they don't have the skills to do it. So in that case, obviously you jump in and help them. But then afterwards you think, what else could I do in the future so that the next time Leanne comes to me, I can say, I trust your judgment. And there's a learning opportunity there. So what you're trying to do is build judgment, because that's more important than skill. You need the skill, but you also want people to make judgment calls, good judgment calls in different situations. And that's one of the best ways, one of the simplest things you can do to build an environment where people are okay with change. Because otherwise, it's not the only thing, but otherwise, what happens is people will only follow the rules because that's all they know how to do, and that's all they're rewarded for doing, and they're not taught to do anything else. So of course, if all they're doing is following the rules, how can you create a culture of change? You can't. So build their judgment. Okay, so to finish off, we talked about these 4 things: to assess what's coming up around the corner, over the horizon, to look at your employee value proposition, what are you doing to attract the best people, a little bit around AI, and what are you doing to identify AI champions and be public about the fact that you're open to AI and positive around AI, and what are you doing to build a culture of change. So my last quotation, which I often share at the end of my sessions, is I don't know whether he was tongue-in-cheek when he said this, but I think it's really apt. So from Benjamin Brewster in the 1800s. He said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is. And I reckon this is true for a lot of what we do now. That I hope you've got some good ideas from today's session. I hope you've made some notes. I hope you plan to watch the recording later. I hope you made a list of to-dos, things to do. But can I strongly encourage you to jump in and try them. Try them, see how they work. If they don't work exactly for you, adapt them or discard them. I don't mind, but try them and see how you can make them work for you. And my last message, don't wait. Don't wait for all your ducks to line up in a row. Don't wait for the world to slow down. Don't wait until things are quieter. Don't wait till after the election or after something happening. Start before you're ready. That's the best way for us to be ready for the future of work. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in the future.